Prince Harry just threw his wife under the bus in the most spectacular fashion imaginable, and the fallout is absolutely nuclear. We're talking about a full-scale betrayal that happened on a podcast with Hasan Minhaj, where Harry looked straight into the camera and told parents around the world that they should be really worried about posting photographs of their children online. The problem? His wife has been doing exactly that for months, parading blurred images of Archie and Lilibet across her Instagram like they're products in a catalog. The timing of this disaster couldn't be more perfect, or more devastating, depending on which side of the Montecito mansion you're standing on. Harry sat there, earnest and serious, warning the world about the dangers of social media and children's safety. He talked about generative AI, about digital manipulation, about how parents need to be cautious and concerned. Every single word was a direct contradiction of what Meghan has been building since February, when she was mysteriously sent home from the Invictus Games and immediately started her aggressive Instagram relaunch. She's been posting the children relentlessly, always with conveniently blurred faces, always positioned perfectly for maximum engagement, and now her own husband has publicly destroyed the entire strategy. Sources close to the situation claim the atmosphere in their Montecito home went from tense to absolutely explosive the moment that podcast dropped. Meghan reportedly felt blindsided, humiliated, and furious that Harry would undermine her so publicly without warning. She's been carefully crafting this Instagram presence, using the children as her ace card to stay relevant, and Harry just pulled that card right out of her hand and set it on fire in front of millions of listeners. The contradiction is so glaring that even mainstream media outlets who usually protect the Sussexes couldn't ignore it. Royal commentators immediately picked up on the hypocrisy. Tom Sykes wrote that Harry must absolutely loathe his wife for posting endless images of their children online. And honestly, watching the podcast, it's hard to disagree. Harry's body language screamed discomfort. His words dripped with genuine concern. This wasn't some carefully scripted PR moment. This was a man who has reached his breaking point with his wife's obsessive need to monetize their children's existence. But here's where it gets even more twisted. Harry's team quickly tried to spin it, claiming he wasn't publicly rebuking Meghan, that he was just expressing general concern about social media companies and children's mental welfare. Insiders aren't buying it. The timing is too perfect. The contrast is too stark. Harry speaks the language of protection, while Meghan speaks the language of promotion. And those two languages don't just clash, they're at war. This isn't a minor disagreement about parenting styles. This is a fundamental fracture in their partnership, exposed for the entire world to see, and it's only going to get worse from here. Let's rewind to February and talk about what really started this catastrophic mess. Meghan was at the Invictus Games, Harry's precious pet project, the one thing he actually had going for him that didn't involve trashing his family. And then, out of nowhere, she was sent home early. The official story was vague, the explanations were murky, but the result was crystal clear. Meghan landed back in Montecito absolutely seething, and she made a decision that would eventually blow up her marriage. She was going to take control of the narrative, and she was going to use her children to do it. From that moment forward, Meghan's Instagram became a carefully calculated weapon. Post after post featured Archie and Lilibet, always positioned just right, always with their faces blurred just enough to maintain plausible deniability about privacy concerns. But let's be real about what was actually happening here. This wasn't about sharing precious family moments. This was about brand building. Pure and simple. Meghan saw those children as content, as engagement drivers, as the secret ingredient that would keep her relevant in a world that was rapidly losing interest in her victimhood narrative. Palace insiders whisper that Harry hated it from the beginning. He would watch Meghan stage these shots, position the children like props, blur their faces with surgical precision, and he knew exactly what she was doing. She was turning their kids into commodities, the very thing he claims to despise about royal life. But here's the kicker. Harry didn't have the spine to stop her. He let it happen, day after day, post after post, watching his wife exploit their children for likes and follows while he stewed in silent resentment. Sources suggest the arguments behind closed doors were becoming increasingly vicious. Harry would bring up privacy, safety, the very real dangers of putting children online in an age of AI manipulation. Meghan would counter with brand strategy, staying relevant, building their empire. She saw the Instagram posts as essential to their financial survival. Harry saw them as a betrayal of everything he claimed to stand for when they left the royal family. Both of them were right, and both of them were losing. The desperation in Meghan's strategy became more obvious with each passing month. She wasn't just posting occasionally, she was relentless. Birthday posts, holiday posts, random everyday moments, all featuring those carefully blurred little faces. Royal commentators started noticing the pattern. This wasn't organic family sharing. This was systematic content creation using minors who couldn't consent. And while William and Catherine's children appeared naturally in public, living normal lives, attending school events, Archie and Lilibet were trapped in this bizarre digital prison where they existed only as blurred shapes in their mother's Instagram feed. The most damning part, Meghan genuinely believed she was winning. She thought the engagement metrics justified everything. She thought the comments and shares proved her strategy was working. She had no idea her own husband was about to destroy it all on a podcast with a comedian nobody really cares about. The Hasan Minhaj podcast was supposed to be a friendly softball interview, a chance for Harry to appear relatable and cool in front of an American audience that still doesn't really understand who he is or why he matters. Instead, it turned into a public execution of his wife's entire social media strategy, and Harry seemingly had no idea he was holding the knife. The moment came about 50 minutes into this painfully awkward conversation when Minhaj asked the question that would detonate the Sussex marriage. Should parents post photos of their children online? Harry didn't hesitate. He didn't pause to consider how his answer might land back home. He just launched into this passionate speech about how parents should be really worried and concerned and cautious about putting photographs of their kids online, especially now with the surge of unregulated AI. He talked about digital manipulation, about not knowing where images might end up, about the terrifying reality of children's faces being used in ways parents can't control. Every single word was absolutely correct, absolutely reasonable, and absolutely devastating to Meghan. The best part, or the worst part depending on your perspective, was when Harry suggested that children shouldn't be allowed on social media until they're 35 years old. 35. He said it with a straight face. This grown man who has spent the last 5 years making terrible decisions and blaming everyone else for the consequences. But the underlying message was unmistakable. Harry believes children need to be protected from the digital world at all costs, and yet his wife has been broadcasting their children to that same digital world for months. Royal watchers immediately caught the significance. This wasn't Harry misspeaking or getting caught off guard. This was Harry finally saying out loud what he's been thinking in private for months. He looked genuinely distressed, talking about children's online safety. His voice carried real conviction. This was a man who has been watching his wife do something he fundamentally opposes, and he finally cracked under the pressure of pretending everything was fine. The contrast with Meghan's behavior couldn't be more stark. While Harry preaches protection and privacy, Meghan posts and promotes. While Harry warns about AI manipulation, Meghan curates and calculates every shot for maximum engagement. They're not just on different pages, they're reading completely different books, and one of those books is about to get thrown across the room in a rage. What makes this even more uncomfortable is that Harry recorded this podcast before Meghan's most recent Instagram disaster, the pumpkin patch video where she allegedly accidentally showed the children's faces before frantically having her team scrub the images from every platform they could find. Harry sat there talking about privacy and caution, knowing full well that his wife was planning more content featuring their kids. He knew it was coming, and he said what he said anyway. That's not an accident. That's not a miscommunication. That's a man drawing a line in the sand, and his wife is about to lose her mind when she realizes he just drew it in permanent marker on national media. Now let's talk about the elephant in the room that nobody in mainstream media wants to touch. The children Meghan keeps posting don't always look like the same children, and people are starting to notice in ways that are becoming impossible to ignore. In one shot from the infamous pumpkin patch video, there's a little girl with thick, messy, reddish blonde wavy hair. In another shot from the same video, there's a little girl with long, stringy, dark hair. Samantha Markle put it bluntly when she said she doesn't believe they're the same child, and honestly, the evidence is pretty compelling. The blurred faces strategy that Meghan thought was so clever has actually backfired in the most spectacular way possible. Instead of protecting privacy while still getting engagement, it's raised massive red flags about why these children can never be seen clearly. Royal commentators are asking the questions that Meghan desperately doesn't want answered. Why are the faces always conveniently obscured? Why do the children's physical characteristics seem to change from post to post? Why can't we ever get a clear full frontal image like we do with William and Catherine's children? Sources close to the situation suggest Meghan is absolutely panicking about this narrative gaining traction. She thought she was being strategic, keeping just enough mystery to drive engagement while avoiding the criticism of fully exposing her children. Instead, she's created a conspiracy theory that's spinning completely out of her control. People are comparing screenshots, analyzing hair textures, questioning timelines. The internet has become a forensic laboratory dedicated to figuring out whether Archie and Lilibet are actually in these photos or if Meghan is using stand-ins. The comparison to Michael Jackson parading his children through airports in Mardi Gras masks has become unavoidable. Samantha Markle nailed it when she said this feels like a cover-up, like there's some reason the children genuinely can't be shown clearly. And here's what makes it even more damaging for Meghan. William and Catherine's children appear regularly in public, at events, at school, living completely normal lives with their faces fully visible. There's no mystery, no conspiracy theories, no questions about whether those are actually their kids. But Meghan has created this bizarre situation where her children exist only as blurred shapes and suspicious silhouettes in carefully staged Instagram content. It's not protecting them, it's making them into objects of intense speculation and doubt. Royal insiders whisper that Harry is becoming increasingly uncomfortable with the whole charade. He sees the comments, he reads the analysis, he knows people are questioning whether his children are even real, and that humiliation, that public doubt about his own family's legitimacy, is eating him alive. The worst part for Meghan is that this was entirely self-inflicted. If she had just left the children off social media entirely like Harry clearly wanted, none of this would be happening. If she had shown them clearly and normally like the Wales family does, none of this would be happening. Instead, she chose this middle ground of strategic blurring and careful positioning, and it's blown up in her face in ways she never anticipated. Now Harry has publicly validated everyone's concerns about posting children online, and Meghan is stuck holding the bag. The moment that podcast went live, sources say Meghan's phone started blowing up. Not with congratulations or praise, but with alerts from her PR team, screenshots from royal watchers, links to articles already dissecting the massive contradiction between what Harry just said and what she's been doing for months. And according to insiders close to the situation, Meghan absolutely lost it. We're talking about a full-scale meltdown, the kind of explosive rage that apparently echoes through the halls of their Montecito mansion on a regular basis these days. Word on the street suggests Meghan felt completely blindsided. She claims Harry never warned her he was going to take such a hard stance on children and social media during the interview. She thought this was going to be light, fluffy content, maybe some jokes about American accents and surfing. Instead, her husband went on a podcast and essentially told the world that everything she's been doing with their children is wrong, dangerous, and irresponsible. That's not just undermining her strategy, that's publicly humiliating her in front of millions of people. Palace insiders whisper that the confrontation was nuclear. Meghan reportedly screamed that Harry had sabotaged her, that he'd destroyed months of careful brand building, that he'd made her look like a hypocrite and a bad mother in one fell swoop. Harry apparently fired back that she's been exploiting their children for engagement metrics, turning them into content when he explicitly asked her not to. Both of them were right and both of them knew it, which only made the fight more vicious. The fascinating thing about this explosion is that it reveals the fundamental power dynamic in their relationship, and it's not what Meghan wants the world to believe. She positions herself as the mastermind, the strategic thinker, the one running the show. But Harry just proved he can undercut her entire operation with a single podcast appearance. He didn't ask for permission. He didn't run his talking points by her team. He just said what he actually believes, and it detonated her carefully constructed narrative like a bomb. Sources suggest Meghan tried to do damage control immediately. Her PR machine went into overdrive, putting out articles about how she's finally showing the children's faces, spinning the blurred images as some kind of generous compromise, but the public wasn't buying it. Royal commentators were already connecting the dots between Harry's words and Meghan's actions, and the story was writing itself without any help from her expensive publicists. Behind closed doors, the question everyone was asking became unavoidable. How does a marriage survive when the husband publicly contradicts the wife's core strategy? How do they move forward when one of them speaks the language of protection and the other speaks the language of promotion? Industry insiders claim Meghan demanded Harry issue some kind of clarification, walk back his statements, make it clear he wasn't talking about her specifically. Harry reportedly refused. He said what he said, he meant what he said, and if she didn't like it, maybe she should stop posting the children. The line had been drawn and neither of them was backing down. Here's what's really eating Meghan alive, and insiders say this is the part that keeps her up at night scrolling through social media in a fury. William and Catherine's children appear regularly in public, smiling, waving, attending events, living completely normal royal lives with their faces fully visible for the world to see. There's no mystery, no blurred images, no conspiracy theories. George, Charlotte, and Louis are just kids being kids, and the public adores them for it. Meanwhile, Archie and Lilibet exist only as shadowy figures in carefully staged Instagram content, and the comparison is absolutely killing Meghan. Royal commentators have started making this comparison more explicitly, and it's devastating for the Sussex brand. One side of the family treats their children like normal human beings who happen to have royal status. The other side treats their children like classified information that needs to be carefully managed and strategically revealed. One approach looks healthy and well-adjusted. The other looks calculated, paranoid, and frankly bizarre. Guess which approach the public respects more? Sources close to the situation claim Meghan is absolutely obsessed with the Wales family's social media presence. She studies every photo, analyzes every public appearance, seethes over every positive comment about how normal and relatable William and Catherine's children seem. She genuinely cannot understand why her strategic approach isn't working better than their apparently effortless authenticity. The answer is painfully obvious to everyone except her. People can smell desperation and calculation from a mile away. The Michael Jackson comparison that Samantha Markle made has gained serious traction in royal watching circles, and it's the kind of parallel that Meghan absolutely despises because it's uncomfortably accurate. Jackson paraded his children through airports in masks, creating mystery and speculation, turning them into objects of fascination rather than just letting them be kids. Meghan is doing essentially the same thing with her blurred faces and strategic positioning, and the optics are equally disturbing. Normal parents don't need to blur their children's faces. Normal parents don't create elaborate mysteries around their kids' appearances. Normal parents just share photos if they want to or don't if they prefer privacy. But Meghan can't commit to either approach. She can't fully show the children because that would invite comparison and scrutiny she's apparently not ready for. She can't fully hide them because then she loses the engagement boost their presence provides. So she's stuck in this impossible middle ground where she's getting the worst of both worlds. The criticism for exploiting them and the conspiracy theories about whether they're even real. Palace insiders whisper that Harry has started throwing the Wales comparison in Meghan's face during arguments. He points out that his brother's children are thriving, appearing in public without drama or mystery, while his own children are prisoners in Montecito who can't even show their faces clearly on Instagram. It's a brutal comparison, and it's one that Meghan has no good answer for. She thought she was being clever and strategic. Instead, she's made her children into the subject of endless speculation, while Catherine's children are simply beloved. That's not winning. That's losing in the most public way possible. Let's talk about Harry's confession on that podcast that reveals just how miserable he actually is in California. Because this moment was absolutely telling. When Hasan Minhaj asked him about things that used to confuse him about America, Harry's answer was brutally honest. He said it's become more confusing, way more confusing. Not clearer, not easier, not better, more confusing. That's not the language of someone who's thriving in their new life. That's the language of someone who's drowning and doesn't know how to admit it. The attempted American accent segment was painful to watch for entirely different reasons than the producers intended. They thought it would be charming and relatable, watching Harry fumble through phrases about breadsticks and ranch dressing at Applebee's. Instead, it became this perfect metaphor for how badly Harry is failing to assimilate into American culture. He can't do the accent, he can't understand the references. He's a British prince playing dress-up in California, and everyone can see through the costume. Sources close to the situation suggest Harry is profoundly unhappy in Montecito, trapped in a life he never actually wanted but feels unable to escape. He misses England desperately. He misses his old friends, his military connections, the structure and purpose that royal life provided even when he claimed to hate it. What he got instead is endless podcasts with comedians he doesn't understand, making jokes about fast food chains he's never been to, pretending to care about American politics that confuse him. The confession about America becoming more confusing wasn't just about culture shock. Royal watchers immediately understood what Harry was really saying. He hates Trump's America. He's a privileged liberal elite living in a bubble of Hollywood progressives, and the real America beyond that bubble terrifies and confuses him. He thought moving to California would be this enlightened escape from stuffy British tradition. Instead, he's more isolated and confused than he ever was in the palace. Palace insiders whisper that Harry has started making comments about potentially moving again, maybe to Canada, maybe back to England if Meghan would ever agree to it. She won't, of course. She's dug her heels into California, into Hollywood, into her desperate attempt to become American royalty. But Harry is realizing that he traded one prison for another, and this new prison doesn't even come with the prestige and purpose that made the old one tolerable. The saddest part is watching Harry try to pretend he's adapted, that he's become American, that he understands this new world. The accent attempt was embarrassing. His confusion about basic American cultural references is obvious. He's been in California for 5 years and he's still completely lost. Meanwhile, Meghan is doubling down on their American life, posting content that screams, "We're never leaving," using their children as proof that they're building something permanent here. Harry's body language throughout that entire podcast screamed discomfort and regret. He looked like a man who's made catastrophic life decisions and is only now beginning to understand the full magnitude of his mistakes. He can't go back to England without admitting total failure. He can't stay in America without accepting permanent misery. So he's stuck, confused, and apparently taking out his frustration by publicly undermining his wife's Instagram strategy. Now we need to talk about the absolute hypocrisy that makes Harry's podcast performance even more outrageous. This man sat there preaching about protecting children online, warning about the dangers of social media, talking about ethics and morals. Meanwhile, he funds and supports an online terror militia called the Sussex Squad that has spent years viciously attacking critics, including the children of William and Catherine. The disconnect is so staggering that it's almost impressive in its audacity. Let's be crystal clear about what the Sussex Squad actually does. These aren't just passionate fans defending their favorites. These are organized trolls who launch coordinated harassment campaigns against anyone who dares criticize Harry and Meghan. They've targeted journalists, royal commentators, and yes, they've gone after children. The anti-Semitic attacks against people like Stephanie Sidley are documented and disgusting. The racist posts, the threatening language, the psychological warfare, it's all there in black and white for anyone willing to look, and Harry knows about it. Sources confirm that he and Meghan are fully aware of what their supporters do in their names. In fact, evidence suggests they actively encourage it. Remember the letter in the Judge Warby case where Harry literally said they had to make it look like they weren't involved? That's consciousness of guilt right there. That's someone who knows exactly what's happening and is deliberately trying to maintain plausible deniability while benefiting from the attacks. So when Harry sits on a podcast talking about online safety and protecting children, royal watchers are absolutely losing their minds over the hypocrisy. Where was his concern for online safety when Sussex squad trolls were attacking George, Charlotte, and Louis? Where was his moral compass when his paid PR machine was destroying people's reputations and mental health? Where was his ethical stance when his wife was allegedly funding bot farms to amplify hatred against anyone who questioned them? Samantha Markle absolutely demolished this hypocrisy when she pointed out that Harry never stepped forward to defend the Wales children from Sussex squad attacks. He talks about children's mental health and well-being, but apparently that only applies to his own children, not his niece and nephews who've been subjected to vicious online harassment by people operating under his banner. The selective morality is breathtaking in its shamelessness. Royal commentators are calling it the fireman arsonist strategy. Harry sets fires through his funded troll army, then shows up with a hose pretending to be the hero fighting the flames. He creates the problem, then positions himself as the solution. It's manipulative, it's calculated, and it's becoming impossible to ignore. The resources he's used to attack others, to destroy reputations, to deflect from his own behavior, those resources dwarf anything normal people have access to in defending themselves. The really infuriating part is that Harry genuinely seems to believe his own performance. He sits there with that earnest expression, talking about emotional intelligence and protecting children, apparently convinced that nobody remembers or cares about the Sussex squad's reign of terror. But people remember. Royal watchers have receipts. The evidence is documented and archived. Harry can preach all he wants about online safety, but his own actions have made the internet demonstrably less safe for countless people, including children. Here's the reality that nobody in the Sussex camp wants to acknowledge, but everyone can see playing out in real time. This disagreement about posting the children online isn't just a minor parenting dispute that couples work through over dinner and compromise. This is a fundamental fracture that exposes incompatible core values, and insiders are whispering that it might be the thing that finally breaks this marriage beyond repair. When one partner speaks the language of protection and the other speaks the language of promotion, you're not just on different pages, you're in completely different relationships. Think about what this conflict actually represents. Harry, for all his faults, and there are many, genuinely seems to believe that children should be protected from the digital world. He's watched what social media did to his mother's legacy, what it's done to his own mental health, and he apparently draws a hard line at exposing his kids to that machine. It's possibly the only principled stance Harry has maintained throughout this entire California nightmare. Meanwhile, Meghan sees those same children as content, as brand assets, as the secret weapon that keeps her relevant when everything else is failing. Those aren't positions you can compromise on. There's no middle ground between our children shouldn't be online and our children need to be online for our brand to survive. One of them has to win this fight, and the loser is going to resent it forever. Sources suggest that's exactly what's happening behind the doors of their Montecito mansion. Every time Meghan posts another blurred image, Harry seethes. Every time Harry talks about privacy and protection, Meghan panics about losing engagement and relevance. Palace insiders claim the arguments have become increasingly vicious and personal. Meghan apparently throws Harry's own hypocrisy in his face, pointing out that he had no problem being photographed constantly as a child, that he benefited from public interest in the royal family his entire life. Harry allegedly fires back that being forced into the spotlight as a child traumatized him, and he's damned if he's going to let Meghan do the same thing to Archie and Lilibet for Instagram likes. Both arguments have merit, which only makes the conflict more intractable. The really devastating part is that this fight is playing out publicly whether they want it to or not. Harry's podcast statements weren't made in private. Meghan's Instagram posts aren't hidden from view. The entire world is watching these two clash over their children's exposure, and the optics are catastrophic for a couple whose entire brand depends on presenting a united front of love and harmony. How do you sell yourself as goals when you can't even agree on whether to post your kids online? Royal commentators are starting to use phrases like marriage ending and fundamental incompatibility, and honestly, it's hard to argue with that assessment. This isn't about whether to paint the nursery blue or pink. This is about core values, about what kind of parents they want to be, about whether their children are family members or brand assets. Harry has drawn his line, Meghan has drawn hers, and those lines are so far apart that no amount of couples therapy or PR spin can bridge the gap between them. So where does this leave the Sussex brand? And more importantly, where does it leave this increasingly toxic marriage? The aftermath of Harry's podcast bombshell is still unfolding, but the damage is already catastrophic and possibly permanent. Meghan can't continue her Instagram strategy without looking like she's directly defying her husband's publicly stated beliefs. Harry can't walk back his statements without looking weak and controlled. They're trapped in a conflict of their own making, and there's no graceful exit available to either of them. Industry insiders suggest that major brands and potential partners are watching this disaster with growing alarm. The Sussex selling point has always been their united front. their partnership against the world, their love story that supposedly justifies all the drama and destruction they've caused. But that narrative is crumbling in real time. When your own husband publicly contradicts your core strategy, you're not a power couple anymore. You're just two people who can't get on the same page about basic parenting decisions. The children, as always, are the real victims in this nightmare. Archie and Lilibet didn't ask to be born into this circus. They didn't choose to have their blurred faces plastered across Instagram for engagement metrics. They didn't decide to become pawns in their parents' increasingly desperate attempt to stay relevant. One day, those kids are going to grow up and realize they could have been at their grandfather's coronation, could have had relationships with their cousins, could have lived normal lives with clear faces and real privacy, and they're going to have questions that neither Harry nor Meghan will have good answers for. Royal watchers are speculating about how long this marriage can actually survive under this kind of pressure. The fundamental disagreement about the children is just the most visible symptom of deeper problems. Harry is miserable in America. Meghan refuses to leave. Harry wants privacy and protection. Meghan needs publicity and promotion. Harry occasionally shows flashes of wanting to reconcile with his family. Meghan has burned those bridges so thoroughly that reconstruction is impossible. These aren't minor differences. These are irreconcilable divisions that grow wider every single day. The most telling detail from all of this: Harry's team tried to spin the podcast comments as not being directed at Meghan specifically, just general concern about social media companies and children's welfare. But nobody is buying that deflection. The timing is too perfect. The contrast is too stark. Harry said what he said knowing exactly how it would land, and that suggests a man who's either given up on protecting his wife's feelings or actively wants to undermine her. Neither option bodes well for their future together. So here we are watching in real time as the Sussex fairy tale dissolves into recrimination and public contradiction. Harry destroyed Meghan's Instagram strategy with a few sentences on a podcast. Meghan's response will determine whether this marriage limps forward or finally collapses under the weight of its own contradictions. The children remain trapped in the middle, their faces blurred, their futures uncertain, their parents at war over how much of their lives should be sold for content. Drop your thoughts below, like, subscribe, and stay tuned because the next video is waiting, and you won't believe what's coming next.